Time now for Back Pages tonight here on Sky Sports News. We're bringing you a first look at the sports stories in the morning's newspapers. And joining us are the Guardian sports writer Jonathan New and the Daily Mail's football editor Liam Ladyman. Welcome along to you. Both will hear from you shortly. Let's just quickly run you through the back pages as we have them. We start off in Ian's paper. Trent, Reds would welcome me back. Real new boy leaves the door open to return despite boos. Yes, this after a conversation he's had with the Liverpool owners in the last couple of days. And you can see there Marcus Smith pictured as we get ready for the Lions down under. Back page of The Guardian has Trent Alexander-Arnold pictured as he walks into a new life in Madrid and impresses with his language skills. Yeah, we'll be seeing and hearing that in a bit. And also Tottenham get their man. Spurs delighted after Thomas Frank confirmed on a 3-year deal. We'll be discussing that in depth. Back page of the Mirror. Franks a lot. Spurs pay £10 million to get B's boss and give him £7 million a year. You can see Trent Alexander-Arnold there at the top of the back page of the Mirror. And then on the inside, the front of the sports section of the Telegraph, Spurs joy at sealing Frank deal. And you can see a picture of, well, a rather concerned-looking Rory McIlroy. McIlroy meltdown. Late blow-up leaves US Open hopes in tatters. And back page of the Times in the sports section. Spurs appoint Frank on a deal to 2028. And Amira Raducanu, after reaching the quarterfinals at Queen's, will be Great Britain's top female player after Katie Bolter went out of the event at Queen's. OK, welcome along once again to Jonathan and to Ian. Jonathan, I'm going to start off with you and the back page of The Guardian. Tottenham get their man. Spurs delighted after Frank confirmed on a 3-year deal, writes Sir David Heitner. In terms of, it's been obviously, a little while since that Europa League final, and it was always expected to be the case that Ange Postecoglou would lose his job. It has now been, all sorted. He's now in with his backroom team. How do you feel Spurs have handled this, Jonathan?
Yeah, I think Frank is a pretty smart appointment. The conundrum for Spurs and Daniel Levy was always how you kind of carry on and maintain and preserve all of the good things that Ange Postecoglou did in terms of culture, in terms of keeping the squad together, in terms of his people skills, and obviously that the mentality that helped them to their first trophy win, whilst also managing to break into that tough Premier League top 16. And Frank, I think, over guys like Areola and Marco Silva, I think is much more similar to Postecoglou than those other two. Partly, because of his people skills, the fact that he doesn't really care what people think of him. He's prepared to think outside the box, but also the style of football they play. And this is a team that at Brentford that consistently outperformed expectations, that have consistently outperformed their wage bill. They played some very good football in the Championship. They were the highest highest possession team in those two teams, and then basically switched up to join the Premier League and had to play a more pragmatic style, played a slightly longer ball style, and then after they lost Ivan Toney a couple of summers ago, then changed their style again. So I think there's a lot to love there. I mean, I'm interested to see what he does with players like Brennan Johnson and Dominic Solanke and Pedro Porro as well, and how we can get those players firing.
Yeah, the style of play is a big talking point, isn't it, Ian? And what he did at Brentford, he was allowed to innovate and switch up, just as Jonathan has described. But how would Spurs fans react to having less of the ball compared to what they had under Ange Postecoglou?
Well, if it comes with good results, I think they'll cope okay with it. But it's a pertinent question, a pertinent point. I do think that I endorse a lot of what Jonathan said about Thomas Frank. Very, very bright guy. Pretty much unblemished record in terms of his progress at Brentford and the way he handles himself and the way that he handles players. The way, for example, he handled the departure of Ivan Toney, almost seamless, the way that Brentford moved on. However, when a manager moves from a modest-sized Premier League club to a big Premier League club, there is always that element of unknown. The scrutiny is greater, the pressure is greater, the demands on time are greater, and as you say yourself, the scrutiny of how you play is greater, and it'll be fascinating to see how Thomas Frank handles all of that. It's like going from a paddling pool to the ocean, going from Brentford to Tottenham, with the greatest of respect to Brentford. And look, some managers deal with it really well. Look at Eddie Howe. Was at Bournemouth, spent a little time out the game, went to Newcastle, presents himself as exactly the same guy, and his progress has continued. Someone like Graham Potter, although there were mitigating circumstances, went from Brighton to Chelsea and struggled a little bit. You could argue that you can still see some of the damage inflicted by that spell when you look at Potter now and some of the things he does and says. So how will it go for Thomas Frank? It's absolutely impossible to say. He will be expected to win games first and foremost, because that's what got, despite all the emotion understandably attached to Tottenham's Europa League win, it's the fact that Tottenham lost too many games that got Ange Postecoglou sacked. That is the first thing that needs to be corrected.
What sort of traits do you think will serve him well, Jonathan, as he makes this significant step up, as Ian has been alluding to there, to a team that are going to be playing in the Champions League as well as week in, week out in the Premier League?
Well, he's an incredibly smart tactical manager. I think, much smarter than his predecessor in terms of finding solutions and in terms of innovating. I think you remember earlier this season when teams basically they couldn't stop Brentford scoring within about 20 seconds. He's always been finding little edges like that. He's always been innovating in order to find solutions, but he marries that up with people skills. And I think the point that Ian raises about Graham Potter was a really good one, because if you look through, if you look at Brentford, they are a brilliantly run club. Everything is in alignment. The finances make sense. There's real clarity over mission and roles and structure. And if you look a little bit further back, when he was at Brøndby, they didn't have that. The finances were a mess. There was kind of a very fractured relationship with the owner, and Frank couldn't do his best work and ended up quitting. And I think that's the key. It's not just about if Spurs think Frank is going to come in and fix everything, then they're going to be mistaken about that, because things need to be in alignment. Whether it's recruitment, whether it's the staff he has around him. Levy is going to need to back him and give him full backing if he's going to get the best out of this manager, for which they're paying such a hefty fee.
Well, at least he's managed to get most of the backroom staff that he wanted, Ian, particularly Justin Cochrane, a first-team assistant coach, but also Chris Haslam and Joe Newton, and he's also joined by Andreas Gilson, who's coming from Manchester United as an assistant coach. How critical do you think that is?
Yeah, I think it's really important, and it's interesting because simply because that's a very traditional way to do it. Many managers go from club to club, taking the people that they know with them, to people that they trust, people that they've worked with before. Totally understandable approach. Ange Postecoglou did it totally differently. Wherever Ange Postecoglou has been, he's almost started again with his backroom staff. And I know for a fact that was one of the reservations that people at Tottenham started to have about Postecoglou in his second season, was they used to look at him and see quite an isolated figure, someone who wasn't necessarily or obviously leaning on the people around him. There were some questions about whether the people around him quite had the experience. Now that's the way Postecoglou chooses to do it. Frank is doing it the more traditional way, taking people that he knows. I totally understand that. Recruitment will be so important for Tottenham going forward. We know the model that they have under their technical director, Johan Lange, and they like to, buy young players, develop them, and then see them do well or move them on at profit. You could argue that's not what Tottenham need at the moment. I understand why they do it, and they've done it to some degree with some degree of success with players like Bergvall, for example. But they also need some oven-ready players. They absolutely do, for the Premier League and the Champions League. Is Dominic Solanke good enough, durable enough to carry that attack through a Premier League season and a European season? Not sure about that. How do they get around that? Will they buy? Will they react to circumstance and deviate from the path that they decided they were going to take a couple of summers ago? That will also be absolutely fascinating, because that squad will need some more depth and some more quality.
Yeah, I wonder, how much do you think Thomas Frank will be backed, Jonathan, and where do you expect him to want to strengthen? Are we going to see significant changes in that Tottenham Hotspur squad?
Well, I'd like to think so. I think that one of the biggest criticisms of the ownership from the fan base over the previous season has been how the depth of the squad has been exposed. And obviously, there was a kind of a freakish injury crisis in the middle of the season, and it really exposed how little experience and how little contingency there was. So, there are big questions like, if Son Heung-min, is he the player that he was 3 or 4 years ago? Is he going to need to be moved on at some point? To what extent can you rely on him? To what extent can you rely on Solanke to play 50 or 60 games as a number 9 without a big dip in form or physical fitness? So that's one issue. The other issue is when you do your business. And because Tottenham and Levy have liked to operate in terms of doing your business as late as possible, getting best value for money for the business, and sometimes that can be antithetical to actually creating the team spirit and the cohesion and putting in the block of tactical and physical work that you need to do early in the summer. So it's whether they can do their business early enough for Frank to get his players and impose his ideas on a squad.
Yeah, so that axis between Thomas Frank and Daniel Levy is key, but I also wonder, Ian, what about Thomas Frank in the media? I mean, he's always been, pretty gracious. He's always been very, very, gets on with the media. He doesn't ever really seem to have any issues. But as you mentioned before, the scrutiny isn't there so much when you're at Brentford. It will be at Spurs. If he doesn't start well, do you think he's got the wherewithal, the qualities to handle that? Or do you think he might go the way of Ange Postecoglou and at times get a bit spiky about it?
I hope we don't see any of Ange's passive aggression and staring at the floor, etc. We've probably had enough of that for a couple of seasons. Look, Thomas Frank has been excellent with the media. Brentford generally are excellent with the media. They're very front foot with the media. Thomas Frank's very front foot with the media. He likes to get to know people. He knows people's names. He does it on purpose. He understands the benefit of it. He understands naturally, instinctively, the benefit of being emotionally connected to the people that he write about and talk about his football club, because it makes sense. So many managers don't do it. So many managers are too scared of the media. Thomas hasn't been like that. However, it will be different. He will be asked. He'll have to do much more media for a start, especially now they're in the Champions League. Much more media. There'll be many more people in the room. There'll be more Tottenham games on the TV. He'll be asked a different kind of question, whether he'll still be able to do those lovely Sunday walks that he likes to do around Richmond and down the Thames. I do not know whether he will. And all these things come into play because it is different. Will he cope with it? Yes, I think he will cope with it, but you never quite know. It's a huge jump.
Yeah, it is. And they've appointed him on a deal until 2028. All right, thank you for the moment, Jonathan and Ian. We're going to take a quick break, other side of which we will look at more of the sports stories in the morning's newspapers, including this in the Telegraph. Trent impresses at Real with word-perfect start. We're going to be hearing from Trent Alexander-Arnold on his arrival at Real Madrid.
de enseñarle mi juego a los madridistas.
I want to show Real Madrid fans how I play. I do realise I'm signing for Real Madrid, the demands are high, but I'm going to give my all for the team and Real Madrid fans.
I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I thought that was pretty impressive. I'm going to give him a solid 8.5 out of 10 to Trent for his efforts in Spanish. I mean, clearly, you know, it was rehearsed. He'd thought about it. He's been speaking it for months. We found out afterwards. And I think, you know, that we know through the transfers of David Beckham from Manchester United and also Gareth Bale from Tottenham that this is what you do when you join Real Madrid. Just your thoughts, Ian, on how he addressed the assembled media there in his Spanish.
You know what I was thinking when I was watching that? I was just thinking that is actually the first time that Trent will ever have done a press conference like that, because obviously he was an academy graduate at Liverpool, so he's never joined a club before. Introductory press conferences are pretty nerve-wracking things, particularly nerve-wracking when it's your first time, particularly nerve-wracking when you're coming from Liverpool amongst all the fuss that we know about. It's Real Madrid. It's in Spain, and he goes and he stands there and he delivers it in Spanish. Didn't seem to be an auto cue, so he'd remembered it really, really well. It seemed to me as though he did it authentically with a pretty impressive accent, and I think it's a fabulous thing to do. I know it's gone down very, very badly on Merseyside. He'll have to deal with that. But I tell you what, it's a wonderful story. This is a kid who was born within a 6-iron from Anfield, came through the academy. It wasn't always easy for him at first. He struggled at times. He had issues with anger management on the field, had to be dealt with a few times by some of his academy coaches who warned him that he wouldn't make it if he didn't sort that side of his game out. He sorted it out. He gets in the Liverpool team. He wins everything there is to win. He plays 30-odd times for England. And there he is standing... proud products of Liverpool, standing behind the podium in Madrid, starting life as a Real Madrid player, presenting himself like that. It's an absolutely fabulous story, I think, and a great reflection also on England's academy system.
Inside page of the Daily Telegraph have the headline, Trent impresses at Real with word perfect start. Yes, it was. I mean, you know, you're right, by the way, Ian. It was a pretty impressive accent as well. Like he's obviously worked hard at it. What do you make of, Jonathan, about how he will face the cultural challenge of moving to somewhere like Spain and everything that it brings with him? Because we know that for Gareth Bale, that was pretty difficult. You know, he wasn't particularly included, you know, in the squad in terms of, you know, he was very much more of a loner, didn't speak much of the language. It seems like Trent is going to take this head on.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, like he's an educated guy. He's a really smart guy. He's a curious guy, a worldly guy. You know, obviously he shared like a dressing room with Spanish speakers for 7 years. There is something I find quite funny about how it says something about how footballers are still viewed by a lot of people in this country. When a guy managed to say something in a foreign language and everyone just gawps in wonder, like, gosh, how has he done that? Obviously he learned Spanish at school, like a lot of people do, and then obviously from Liverpool fans you got the idea that it's almost this form of betrayal. But I think the fact that he's taken this challenge on at this point in his career suggests that he has a real appetite for wanting to challenge himself, and the cultural aspects that you mentioned, it will help him integrate. The fact that he so clearly wants to be, he wants to be a part of the dressing room, and not just in a footballing sense, in a way that Bale arguably never was. He's made a career out of defying expectations of what what people were kind of envisioning for him. As a player, as a guy, he's done it again today, and under the new leadership of Xabi Alonso, I wouldn't bet against him doing on the pitch in Madrid white as well.
Well, yeah, and he will know about moving from Merseyside to Madrid. Although, of course, Xabi Alonso is a Spaniard, so that would have always been more comfortable for him. Let me take to the Daily Mail, your paper, Ian, and the headline: Trent, Reds would welcome me back. How surprising is this that this sort of detail has emerged? Because it seemed like it was all going a bit pear-shaped in terms of his relationship with the fans. There were the boos at Anfield 4 weeks ago, but now it seems like the owners have spoken to him and been very praiseworthy of him.
Yes, although, the owners are probably on one side of this debate, and a significant number of the supporters are on the other side of the debate. I was at Anfield for the final day of the season against Crystal Palace. I was delighted to see that Trent wasn't booed that day. He was cheered when he got his medal and cheered when he lifted the trophy, and that was all absolutely right. However, as Jonathan alluded to there is now an assumption. Well, certainly if you have a look down my social media feed, there seems to be an assumption now that because Trent spoke some Spanish today, it means he's been preparing for this move for months and months, which means that he always knew that he was leaving Liverpool, which means that he's committed an even greater sin than some Liverpool fans think he's committed by leaving in the first place. So I don't think there will be any going back for Trent Alexander-Arnold. Actually, it's a very, very nice thing for the owners to say to him. And I'm sure, and if he's taking it that way, if he's taking it literally, I would be surprised. I think he sees it as a polite gesture. I don't think there'd be any going back to Liverpool as a Liverpool player for Trent Alexander-Arnold. And when he goes back, as I'm sure he will do at some point in the Champions League, it will be quite a night for him in not necessarily the best of ways, I would say.
Well, another man who described his move as a dream come true is Matheus Cunha, who is now officially a Manchester United player. Inside pages of the Telegraph Sports section, there he is, big smile on his face. Brazilian Matheus Cunha unveiled at Old Trafford after a £62.5 million move from Wolves. Cunha signing marks radical shift in United transfer policy. Buying players with proven Premier League experience now appears central to the club's recruitment strategy. So no more sort of going for the likes of Anthony and Rasmus Højlund, etc. Jonathan, do you think this is the right way for United to go?
Well, if it is a marked shift, I think it suggests a certain impatience among the top brass over how slow progress under Ruben Amorim has been so far. I think the fact that Cunha and Mbeumo have been signed so early in the window is a real statement of intent. I know people kind of cast aspersions about some of the finances, but United are kind of confident that there's no issue there. I think what really the part that is going to be key for me is not just how Cunha and Mbeumo, if it is Mbeumo who they bring in, fit together, but who plays in that number 9 role, who is so crucial in an Amorim system. There's some talk, I think it was the back of the eye, was it, that's mentioning Gyökeres. I think that is the guy who is going to be key to making the whole system work. Obviously, Gyökeres did an amazing job at Sporting for Amorim. Question marks, I think, over whether he can adapt that style to the Premier League, very different style of football. But yeah, it does look like United are doing their business early, which I think makes a marked change from how they've approached previous windows.
Yeah, 54 goals in 52 games for Gyökeres at Sporting this season. In fact, he is the subject of the headline in the Eye in United calling on complicated Gyökeres chase because of what his president has said there at Sporting. How crucial do you think that it is that United do try and push for this player, or it sounds like by the headline they're thinking of looking elsewhere?
It's fundamental that they get a goal scorer. Look, Delap was the number 1 target. And they didn't get him. He's gone to Chelsea. So now, obviously, they're moving down their list. And you look at players like Cunha, very, very good player, and Mbeumo, very, very good player. But I tell you what, you drop those players into that team without a goal scorer, and I'm afraid Manchester United continue to go round in circles for the next 8-9 months because they haven't got any goals. That Bruno Fernandes is the only source of goals in that team. Don't think it's going to happen for Højlund. Xerxes, maybe give him a little bit more time, who knows. So when I say it doesn't matter who it is, of course it matters who it is, but the fact is it's got to be someone. And it's all very well to brief the media. James Ducker, I noticed, wrote that story in the Telegraph. I have a great deal of time and respect for James. I'm sure that story is well sourced. However, that is so difficult to do. Just to say, we're going to start buying Premier League players only. How on earth do they do that? Who does that? Which of the big clubs manage to do that? They'd all want to do it if they could, and you can't. Premier League players are so expensive. I'm
going to have to jump in, I'm afraid, Ian. Apologies, we're out of time. But appreciate your company, Jonathan and Ian, on Back Pages tonight. Back tomorrow at 10:30.